Hello, I'm Chet Huntley. Before this picture starts, I'd like to say a few words about the mood of our times in which this film is presented. Almost every month, we hear of violent new uprisings somewhere in the world, often in countries that seem peaceful and serene, like Asia 15 years ago. Since then, problems in Africa, the Middle East, India, Southeast Asia have made headlines. All of them, it seems, part of a trend linked with the impact of Western civilization on simple farming countries, clouded by the issue of communism, toughened by the deep roots of religious differences, and overall beset by the problem of race, of man's relation to man. Somewhere, somehow, the challenges arising from these problems must be faced. Beginnings, however crude and perhaps oversimplified, must be made to deal with them. The picture you're about to see shows how these beginnings are being made in one place in the world. Kenya, a country almost the size of Texas, lies inland from the east coast of Africa, almost on the equator. Some call it the big game capital of the world, where sportsmen on safaris hunt Cape buffalo, elephants, lions, and leopards. Geographically, our picture is concerned with this plateau area that starts some 20 miles from the capital city of Nairobi and extends northward over 200 miles. The place, a tiny village called Kapenguria in the colony of Kenya in British East Africa. The scene, a schoolhouse built for the education of Kikuyu natives, but now converted into a heavily guarded courtroom. The occasion, the trial of men accused of directing one of the most murderous secret societies ever known, the dreaded Mau Mau. The time, April 8, 1953, by our calendar. But for millions of natives on the African continent, time has stopped for a moment. Only a brief moment before it runs out. For whatever the white man's court in Kapenguria decides, it is the jailed ringleader, an Oxford-educated Kikuyu named Jomo Kenyatta, who has fired the imaginations of natives all over Africa. He has rejected the white man's established order and way of life and his superiority over the black races. The white man's verdict is given by Chief Judge Ransley Thacker. It is my belief that you organized the Mau Mau Society, the object of which was to drive out all Europeans from Kenya, and in doing so, to kill them if necessary. Some small part of the Mau Mau plan has succeeded. But perhaps the greatest tragedy of all is that you have turned Kikuyu against Kikuyu. Your Mau Mau Society has slaughtered, without mercy, defenseless Kikuyu men, women, and children in hundreds. You have let loose upon this land a flood of misery and unhappiness. You have put the clock back many years. You have much to answer for, and for that, you will be punished. For managing the Mau Mau Society, Jomo Kenyatta and his disciples are sentenced to 7 years hard labor. Rumors flash across the Kikuyu Reserve that a Mau Mau attempt will be made to rescue the men. But the scheme is foiled when the court orders them flown off to a prison along Kenya's northern frontier and orders his immediate return to England. But the 58-day trial has done its work. It has made both white and black African more aware than ever that they sit on a continental time bomb. They know that Mau Mau is only a symptom of the natives' growing unrest with the white man's rule. They know that Mau Mau has not spread to the other 175 million blacks of Africa yet. But they know, too, that the calm and measured words of Jomo Kenyatta are dynamite. Is Mau Mau the spark that will light the fuse? Only time will tell. And time is running out. Too many, Mau Mau's determination to drive the white man out of Kenya burst upon the scene with cruel and surprising suddenness. But actually, Mau Mau has its roots deep grown in the colony's past. To understand these roots, let's turn back the clock 50 years to around the beginning of the century, when time in Kenya seemed without end. The uplands of the interior had, unlike most of equatorial Africa, a cool, pleasant climate. In 1900, it was still unknown to the white man. The Kikuyu tribe, largest of Kenya's 5 native groups, farmed over 10,000 square miles of rich farming and cattle grazing country. Primarily an agricultural people, the Kikuyus depended entirely on the land for their material and spiritual needs. The earth was considered sacred, and so property ownership was carefully defined. Originally, some of their land was virgin soil, homesteaded by the earliest natives, while other sections were purchased from the Wanderobo tribe living to the south. Eventually, every inch of the 16,000 square miles of highlands around sacred Mount Kenya was claimed by the Kikuyus for their own. This land, according to native customs, was private property, to be passed down from one generation to another through the male descendants. Among the Kikuyus, where a man can marry as many wives as he can afford, ownership gradually assumed clan or tribal proportions, since there were many descendants. But such ownership was always considered to be held in trust for the spirit of the original owner. Thus, life for a Kikuyu was nurtured by the sacred earth he lived on. It was simple and satisfying, based on loyalty first to the family unit, then the tribe or one's relatives, and finally to one's particular age group. Then suddenly, at the turn of the century, the Kikuyu population was cut in half by a series of droughts and epidemics. Then, a bare 50 years ago, the first British settlers arrived and explored land they thought belonged to no one. They soon settled down to farm and raise cattle. To clear title to the land, they negotiated with the Kikuyus. Here arose the misunderstanding that has plagued both Kikuyu and settler to this day. Neither side spoke the other's language. And in reverting to Kiswahili, the pidgin language of the early traders, the white men sealed bargains they considered as final. But to the Kikuyu, the land was private property that could never be sold, only temporarily shared. It was many years before either side was aware of the error. For the whites, they were years of hard pioneering, improving the land. Lacking workers trained in his methods of farming, the settler soon developed a squatter system to attract Kikuyu labor. The Kikuyus were offered enough land to build huts, grow crops, and pasture goats and cattle. In return, they worked on settlers' farms for 8 months of the year. Meanwhile, the white man's pioneering continued, building cities, mines, industries, railroads. Today, Kenya's 1,700 miles of railroads carry over 3 million passengers and more than 3 million tons of cargo a year. Over 6,000 miles of highways and improved roads now link the inland cities with the coastal ports. Thus, for the whites, the first 50 years were years of meeting the physical problems of settling on the land and developing the colony's potential for trade. For the Kikuyus, benefiting from the white man's methods of controlling crop failures and epidemics, they were years of a growing population on tribal lands that became smaller and smaller. As early as 1922, when the Kikuyus tried to recover their land, it was too late. The white man's authority was firmly established. By 1948, when the new generation of Kikuyu came back from the war, they knew that with their land gone, their old way of life had collapsed. Landless, their native schools banned, public meetings prohibited, relegated to employment as laborers, kitchen boys, and servants, the Kikuyus represented a human vacuum waiting to be filled by a strong, dynamic leader. And into this vacuum, Jomo Kenyatta has been accused of bringing the fanatic cult of Mau Mau. Patterned after Communist Party organization, the Mau Mau is divided into cells of from 3 to 10 people each. Cell leaders know only their immediate superior. Many Kikuyus never even suspect that some of their closest friends, relatives, and neighbors are active Mau Maus. The power of Mau Mau begins with the oath of initiation, cunningly devised to prey upon the childlike fears of simple, uneducated people long steeped in a primitive dread of death. No one knows the true origin and meaning of the words Mau Mau, but the initiation ritual is a distorted version of old tribal ceremonies. For the magic potion that is drunk, a goat has been slaughtered and the half-digested grass taken from his stomach. The juice was squeezed into a crude trough made from a banana stalk, the traditional symbol for all religious and magic ceremonies. A selected piece of sheepskin was cut to stir goat's blood and entrails into the mixture. After the initiate has tasted the brew 7 times, he is prepared for the oath-taking ceremony that night. 7, the number of orifices in the human body, is a black magic symbol common to many primitive cults. To the Kikuyu, it represents the 7 holes in the sacred Githothi stone, the symbol of his ancient religious beliefs resting on top of Mount Kenya, the home of his gods. Now the number 7 is used with terrible purpose as the prospective Mau Mau is led off into the night. In a native hut deep in the jungle, an arch of banana stalks and leaves has been fashioned. 7 native apples, a substitute for human eyes, form a support for the arch and symbolize the watching eyes of evil spirits. Here, the awed and frightened candidate is brought before a witch doctor and ordered to repeat the 7 parts of the terrifying Mau Mau oath. If I tell any secrets of the Mau Mau, this oath will kill me. If I am called in the night and refuse to come, this oath will kill me. If I see anyone steal white man's property, I must help him. I must hide what he gives me and say nothing, or this oath will kill me. If I am told to bring in the head of a white man and refuse, this oath will kill me. I will refuse to go to the white man's schools and churches, or this oath will kill me. I will obey all orders of the Mau Mau, or this oath will kill me. 7 cuts on the upper arm, telltale proof of a full-fledged Mau Mau, remind the initiate there is no turning back. If caught, these scars can mean imprisonment or even death. Believing in the power of witchcraft and tribal magic, Kikuyus who take the oath are convinced they must obey its orders or suffer punishment at the hands of their ghosts. For those who refuse to take the oath or who oppose Mau Mau, there are horrible reprisals. March 26th, 28 miles from the capital city of Nairobi, at a native village called the Lari location. Loyal tribal chiefs and government workers living in compounds built for the protection of their families are suddenly lured away by reports of Mau Mau attacks on neighboring farms. That evening, while the men are still away, innocent women, children, and old men sleep peacefully as a mob of Mau Maus sets fire to their huts. Mothers, sons, and daughters, awakened by the heat of the flames, frantically try to escape by climbing out of windows, breaking down doors, only to be met by Mau Mau guns and pankas. Young children are torn from their mothers' arms and cut to pieces. Then the knives are turned on the parents. fire roasts those too weak to escape. Over 50 huts burn to the ground as the slaughter goes on into the night. An attack by men born to tribal respect for women and children, now gone berserk in an orgy of insane fury. Morning brings a scene of horror to grief-stricken relatives who search the ruins for more victims. Chief Luka, the tribal elder. By nightfall, a total of over 300 dead and mutilated are counted. Mau Mau has committed the most vicious atrocity in Kenya's history. Next, as if to signal the beginning of more widespread violence, Mau Mau raiders strike at a native police outpost. Driving right into the middle of the compound, they blast the headquarters building with close-range rifle fire and hack to death a constable and a trustee. They escape with stores of rifles, submachine guns, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. To the military, white settler, and frightened Kikuyu, this planned butchery is an open declaration of war. Rumors spread that over 500,000 Kikuyus have been forced to take the oath. Mau Mau informers mysteriously disappear. More and more villages are burned to the ground. The senior chief of one of the largest Kikuyu reserves is shot to death while sitting in his car. Hundreds of sheep and cattle owned by loyal Kikuyus are slashed and left to die on the open fields. In the following weeks, whole families of white settlers in isolated farmhouses far out in the veldt are reported slashed to death. Identification of suspects is virtually impossible, as loyal Kikuyus fear Mau Mau reprisals to themselves and families. For refusing to cooperate with the police, whole communities are punished. Herds of cattle, sheep, goats, vital assets in the lives of Kikuyus, are impounded by the government and driven away to collecting centers. There, under armored car guard, they're assembled for collection by government trucks and driven to huge stock centers. Kikuyus by the thousands are ordered off squatter settlements on white farms and sent back to already overcrowded reserves. Faced with the possibility of widespread panic and loss of faith in the government's power to protect loyal Kikuyus, Kenya's British governor, Sir Evelyn Baring, makes a flying trip to the outlying native districts. The 50-year-old son of Britain's famed Egyptian proconsul, the late Lord Cromer, Governor Baring proclaimed a state of emergency 6 months before. But faced with an unwieldy system of government in which all major decisions are made in London, little was accomplished for months. Now, in meetings with Kikuyu chiefs of the Fort Hall district, Governor Baring sees first-hand evidence of the problems created by Mau Mau. It is suggested by the chiefs, every one high on the Mau Mau list for assassination, that captured Mau Mau be publicly shot or hanged without benefit of trial. Hang them in front of loyal Kikuyus, they urged the governor. That will give us more heart than anything else. Others remind him that the number of loyal Kikuyus is growing, and since many Mau Mau carry firearms, they ask that the Home Guard be supplied with rifles and revolvers. Elsewhere, the governor is asked to stop the flood of tribesmen migrating into the reserves. Through his interpreter, he learns that the main supply point for terrorist arms and ammunition is the capital city of Nairobi itself. Is there some way to set up a system of inspection for Kikuyus entering and leaving the city? Government-sponsored hospitals are also visited by the governor, where he comforts sick and wounded victims of Mau Mau attacks. Afterwards, he inspects members of Home Guard units and congratulates loyal tribesmen for their efforts to eradicate Mau Mau. Aware of the difficulties faced by the police in identifying Mau Mau terrorists, he suggests that the Kikuyus themselves will have to rise up and drive Mau Maus from their country. He assures them that the government, together with the army and police, will give them all possible help. He states his conviction that the fate, not only of Kenya, but of much of Africa, depends on the success or failure of their struggle to rid the country of this growing menace. His forecast of eventual and certain victory marks the beginning of a determined campaign to stamp out every last trace of Mau Mau. A few days later, not far from the site of the Lari massacre, Indian workmen begin building a courtroom for the trial of Mau Maus accused of taking part in the atrocity. Ironically, the site chosen for the trial is the location of Jomo Kenyatta's Teachers College. This had been part of his program to develop an African school system independent of religious and government-sponsored institutions. Soon after the outbreak of Mau Mau, it was closed by the government as a suspected breeding ground for the new cult. Now, with tension high, the area is fenced with barbed wire and poisoned spears. Native guards, soldiers of the King's African Rifles, man guard towers day and night and practice defense drills on the alert for possible Mau Mau attacks. In a surprise raid at a police camp some weeks before, a number of Mau Mau suspects were set free by a gang of terrorists at heavy loss to the defenders. Now the authorities are determined to prevent a repetition of such tactics. As thousands of natives are rounded up and brought before survivors of the massacre and questioned, the hunt for more terrorists goes on. 10 more members of the African Home Guard are slashed to death when Mau Maus raid their huts. In a series of scattered clashes, Home Guard patrols retaliate by killing over 30 members of Mau Mau gangs in the reserve area. Meanwhile, investigations are hampered by streams of refugee Kikuyus who have left their squatter settlements on white farms to the north. They flood through the area on their way back to the native reserves. There they seek protection from terrorists and from the harsh measures of retaliation imposed by white settler extremists searching for Mau Maus. The tally of prisoners grows as suspects are captured in camouflaged underground hideouts where they had been living for weeks. Some of these dugouts were plentifully supplied with food, clothing, weapons, and ammunition. Many of the prisoners are European farm squatters who had been allowed to farm in the government-controlled forest reserves. The prison area is constantly searched by men using mine detectors to spot weapons smuggled in and buried in preparation for rape. Pangas, axes, knives, and scissors are among the many weapons uncovered, despite the close scrutiny of all new arrivals. As special teams from Kenya's Criminal Investigation Department work day and night screening suspects, the prisoners are fed a daily fare of posho, consisting of 1.5 pounds of cornmeal mixed with hot water and shaped into a ball. Commonly regarded as the staple diet for all Kikuyus, posho is actually a result of the gradual loss of native farmland and the uprooting of their way of life. In the early days, the Kikuyu diet was possibly even more varied than that of the white man's. Maize, beans, peas, millet, sweet potatoes, bananas were planted and harvested on every farm. Sheep and goats were the chief sources of meat. To the Kikuyu, cattle are merely a display of wealth and are almost never killed. Cheap and filling, a steady diet of posho has contributed to the gradual undernourishment now seen to be affecting many Kikuyus. But here, as suspects pour in from all sections of the reserves, it is the only practicable food supply. But despite many obstacles and delays, within 3 weeks, over 300 suspects are held for trials by courts convened under special orders of the government. Because the laws of Kenya have no provision to charge persons with mass murder, each crime had to be treated as a separate incident. However, there was full legal authority to charge and try any number of accused jointly for a murder where evidence existed that they acted in concert and in pursuit of a common design. Arrest and conviction depended almost entirely on identification by surviving eyewitnesses, since evidence such as possession of weapons and blood-stained clothing was lacking. Before marching into the courtroom, the prisoners are given identifying numbers to speed up their processing. In the highest traditions of the legal profession, the Bar of Kenya provides counsel for the accused. The legal staff, some of whom are members of Nairobi's growing Asiatic population, are given 7 days to prepare their defenses. Kikuyu chieftains appointed by the court act as assessors to help the presiding magistrate determine the guilt or innocence of the accused. The poisoned tips of their native arrows, traditional symbols of Kikuyu law, are examined by an officer of the court. In accordance with British custom, the guard of honor is inspected by the Supreme Court judge, Mr. Justice de Lestang, before the court is convened. Now, as the prisoners march into the former cattle shed that serves as the courtroom for the first Supreme Court trials ever to be held in the Kikuyu Reserve, speculation is high as to the motives that led them to sink to such depths of bestiality. The Kikuyu member of the Nairobi City Council expresses the belief that sinister foreign forces, possibly Oriental, are at work influencing Mau Mau fanatics. Another wonders if they were under the influence of narcotics. In all, 13 trials are held in which 75 men are convicted and sentenced to be hanged for their crimes. Testimony during the trial reveals a large number of the accused had worked and lived in the area of the massacre for over 25 years. Impressive proof of the deep roots of Mau Mau. In speeches from the prisoner's dock, many said they would like to take the Kikuyu Thengi oath to prove their innocence. Each one made a long address to the judge denying his guilt and accusing the prosecution witnesses of prejudice against him. But the judge dismissed such charges as completely unreal. As members of the Defense Council apply for permission to appeal the judgments, teams of laborers are brought in to build special gallows should the death sentences be upheld for those convicted of taking part in the Lari massacre. Aroused by the Mau Mau threat to all existing law and order, government police and loyal Kikuyu begin to strike back with swift and grim justice. But meanwhile, Mau Mau murders go on, their numbers increasing around the city of Nairobi. Then one morning, in the Kikuyu shanty town of Mathare, a scant 2 miles from the heart of the city, and only a few hundred yards from the main airport, a policeman accidentally stumbles upon the shallow grave of a Kikuyu known for his opposition to Mau Mau. As native police are called to surround the area, the village is evacuated in a matter of minutes. Food is left in cooking pots, Suitcases of possessions are left open. One man leaves his bicycle. Only a few women stop on the outskirts of the village with their bundles and sit down to wait. Aware that the site has been a hotbed of Mau Mau suspects, Kenya Police Commissioner O'Rourke orders the entire village evacuated and destroyed. Here the Kikuyus had built houses of 14 to 20 rooms, each room accommodating an entire family. But crowding more intense than this is found in the Kikuyu reserves, where the population runs over 400 persons to the square mile, while in the white reserves, the population is only 45 persons to the square mile. The latter figure even includes some 200,000 Kikuyus who worked as squatters on the white farms. Inhabitants are allowed to salvage some of their possessions, their most prized belongings often being no more than strips of corrugated iron roofing. They are searched before leaving the area and then thoroughly screened by police. Now, as bulldozers move in, the horrors of the village are revealed. Evidence indicates that a Mau Mau court has operated here, carrying out death sentences on the spot. After buildings are demolished and surface layers of dirt scraped away, authorities are led to gruesome discoveries as bodies are found of natives who had refused to take the Mau Mau oath and had disappeared. Loyal Kikuyu workers with long records of service to business firms and who had refused to help Mau Maus infiltrate their companies are found hacked to death. Relatives look on, waiting to identify bodies of prominent Kikuyus kidnapped by Mau Mau. It has long been suspected that the Central Council of Mau Mau has operated near Nairobi. When pamphlets by Jomo Kenyatta are found, this information links with widespread attempts to sabotage industrial and transport organizations in the city. Certainly one way to deal with subversion is the destruction of villages like Mathare. But while bulldozers work, some wonder how many new shanty towns will appear to house the displaced Kikuyus. And they wonder, too, if the bulldozers that wipe out every trace of a village can ever wipe out the ideas that grow in the minds of men. Soon Kenya police officers establish roadblocks as the government orders closer checks on the movements of all Kikuyus. Long a source of friction between native and white settler, the problem of personal identification is a complex one. Among the 5 million natives of Kenya, names are changed at will and reduplicated. Employment is sporadic. Whole families are constantly on the move between farms, villages, and tribal reserves. For years, all natives were required to carry a certificate bearing the name, serial number, tribe, home address, occupation, wages and allowances, and signature of the last employer. But as early as 1929, Jomo Kenyatta led a delegation to London to demand that the system, known as the Kipande, be abolished on the grounds that it discriminated against the natives. Complying with the demand, the Colonial Office substituted an identity card, requiring its possession by all races in Kenya. However, since the declaration of emergency, all Kikuyus who have not returned to the reserves are required to carry detailed work permits. As a further check on their movements, they must obey a curfew and remain indoors each night from sunset to sunrise. But despite these and other precautions, Mau Mau violence goes on. Housewives are taught the use of small arms at close range to defend themselves against the growing number of raids on white farms throughout the Kikuyu country. In many of the attacks, the murders were arranged by trusted houseboys. Terrorists sometimes slipped in through the kitchen and surprised their victims at dinner. Reserve police, made up of every able-bodied white Kenyan farmer and businessman, are organized and trained in the art of jungle warfare, where the only warning of a Mau Mau attack is the crack of a rifle, the flash of a razor-edged panga, hiss of a spear. In jungle fighting, you learn to shoot first. The questions can wait. As news of the growing crisis spreads throughout the world, British Colonial Secretary Sir Oliver Lyttelton arrives in Kenya for a first-hand investigation. Visiting the scene of the Lari massacre, Mr. Lyttelton sees photographs and hears more details of the tragedy. Later, he has a special word of sympathy and encouragement for Chief Makemai, head man and leader of the Kikuyu Guard at Lari, whose family was wiped out in the massacre. During talks with military authorities, high government officials, and tribal chiefs, he learns of the many problems arising from the emergency, of the need for speedier trials of Mau Mau terrorists, of food, housing, and work shortages among displaced Kikuyus, of the demand by Asiatic Kenyans for a more active part in fighting Mau Mau, and of the growing insistence by Africans for a statement of the government's economic, social, and political war aims. Stating that the first duty of government is to maintain peace and order, whatever the situation may be, the Colonial Secretary pledges to increase the efficiency of the security forces and step up the tempo of battle against Mau Mau. Soon, battalions of British regulars are flown in from England, Germany, and the Suez Canal zone, bringing the total forces engaged in Kenya to over 7,000 white troops and 4,000 of the King's African riflemen, in addition to over 20,000 local reserve soldiers and police. Today, there are more troops actively engaged in fighting Mau Mau than the total number of white settlers in the colony. Meanwhile, the civilian population is cautioned to prepare for further dangers and sacrifices. Newspapers, word of mouth, magazines, and special pamphlets warn white settlers that their guns should always be within reach, loaded, and cocked with the safety catch off. Mothers in the outlying farms send their children to Nairobi or Mombasa on the coast for safety. Settlers are advised to clear all shrubbery and trees for at least 30 yards around the homestead, and to change dining hours every day so that Mau Mau terrorists cannot rely on a routine when they plan a raid. Four-star General Sir Cameron Nicholson, Commander-in-Chief of the Middle East Land Force, arrives in Kenya and is greeted by the Chief of the East African Command. After a formal inspection of the Guard of Honor, the General prepares for top-level talks with the enlarged headquarters staff. Reorganization is complete as the military is authorized to issue orders to all security forces throughout Kenya. Now, with full and unhampered power to deal with Mau Mau, plans are laid to launch large-scale offensives against the terrorists. At first, the troops are rushed to outposts in the troubled areas to protect both settlers and natives against Mau Mau raids. Then, after local reserves and police are trained to replace them, the regulars are used in large coordinated offensives. As military measures assume tighter control of the region, Mau Mau terrorists find it more dangerous to play the role of ordinary tribesmen during the day and terrorist at night. They take to the mountains where they are forced to band together for common protection. Thus, the pattern of the struggle changes and becomes one of open warfare. But the Mau Mau guerrillas, constantly on the move, are protected by some of the most difficult campaigning country in the world. To overcome this, today all the Kikuyu reserves and parts of the surrounding troubled areas, over 10,000 square miles in all, are sealed off from the rest of the country. Under a new policy of concentrated drives against selected areas, using heavily armed formations of soldiers, police, and African retainers, Mau Mau casualties have more than doubled. Patrols of Wanderobo trackers, Kikuyu guards, regulars of the Kenya Regiment, Asian Special Police, Lancashire Fusiliers, Devons, Buffs, King's African Rifles, and Askaris of all tribes are searching out and fighting terrorist gangs wherever they are found. Recently, women terrorists are known to have taken part in murders, as the hardcore of Mau Mau utilizes every means to exert its influence. Other members often disguise themselves as KAR soldiers as they move throughout the colony. To prevent Mau Mau forces from forming even larger and more effective groups in the reserves, armored cars mounting 2-pound cannon are deployed throughout the area. Other heavily armed patrols equipped with mortars and automatic weapons are constantly attacking terrorist hideouts. Heavy charges of dynamite are used to blast caves sheltering die-hard Mau Maus. But white settlers are seldom in the mood to offer amnesty to Mau Maus who want to surrender. When the governor proposed that Mau Maus wishing to give themselves up come out of the forests waving green branches over their heads, the white settlers protested with such vehemence that the proposal was withdrawn. Thus, isolated patrol actions are resulting in steadily increasing lists of Mau Mau killed. For now it seems that the battle must be fought to its bloody and bitter end. Meanwhile, pilots of the Kenya Police Reserve Air Wing are assigned sections of the prohibited zones to observe and report any suspicious gatherings of natives. They are also on the alert for a white sheet on the ground, the prearranged danger signal from settlers far out on the veldt. Information radioed by the Reserve Air Wing is immediately coordinated through forward ground patrol and armored car units who quickly dispatch men to a scene of trouble. On airports surrounding the Aberdare region, RAF units of Harvard airplanes, slow-flying aircraft with great maneuverability, are armed with fragmentation bombs and machine guns for bombing and strafing missions. Numbers of Mau Maus accounted for by the planes are painted on the fuselage as pilots prepare for another flight to flush out secret hideouts that cannot be seen from the ground. In the prohibited zones, they may attack without warning. Today, despite the bombings, the enforced military campaigns, the tightening up of all controls over the natives, and the consequent decrease in mass murders, many suspect that Mau Mau membership is still growing. But as battle lines are drawn, the immediate physical threat becomes more open and tangible. And out of this, many can see an end to the reign of Mau Mau violence and terror. To halt the spread of Mau Mau, the government has authorized cleansing or de-oathing ceremonies. Native witch doctors are asked by the government to obtain confessions and absolve those guilty of taking the Mau Mau oath. Thousands of Kikuyus who have taken the Mau Mau oath pay a fee of 50 cents, a sum as impressive to them as the Mau Mau initiation fee, to register and participate in a ceremony designed to appease the spirits invoked in the original oath. As witch doctors chant anti-Mau Mau oaths, faces are brushed with green branches dipped in a special brew. The blood and entrails of goats and cows are used in another mixture. Next, a magic rod is dipped into the brew, and as each native repeats the witch doctor's incantations, he touches the magic rod with his lips. Rituals like these, and the offer of church services for Christians and native ceremonies for the pagans, brings thousands of Kikuyus out into the open to admit having taken the Mau Mau oath. The value of the ceremonies is often questioned, but they do help to indicate the number of Kikuyus who have taken the oath and have been forced to work for the Mau Mau. For those Kikuyus considered to be likely candidates for the Mau Mau, internment camps have been established. The official camp directives state that their aim is the rehabilitation of internees by hard work and propaganda, by religious, education, and other means. Camp chaplains are instructed to effect a change of heart and mind in the internees by substituting a Christian code of behavior for Mau Mau paganism. Recorded lectures by loyal Kikuyu leaders elementary education and farm instruction are included in the programs as the authorities learn to fight fire with fire. But both white and black know that the flames of Mau Mau call for stronger preventive measures than military campaigns, ceremonial pledges of loyalty, or mild programs of brainwashing. For throughout a continent where, on a quarter of the Earth's surface, some 175 million black people are ruled by 5 million whites, the black man's unrest smolders ominously. In Kenya, it is significant that of its 5 native tribes, only the Kikuyu has worked as the white man's servant, waiter, busboy, and janitor. And it is the Kikuyu whom the Christian missionaries have taught the white man's Bible, with its message of human equality in the eyes of God. For wherever the black man has learned of the white man's religion and has watched his high standard of living, he has been aroused to a new sense of his own poverty and inferior social status. If political rights are still vague ideas to uneducated Africans, the land is another matter. Every African understands and loves the land with an almost religious devotion. In Kenya, the 12,000 square miles of fertile and healthy highlands reserved for white farmers have long been a source of grievance to the rapidly increasing population of Kikuyus. But to the white settler, the Kikuyu's use of the land is appallingly wasteful. For centuries, the Kikuyu had no concept of the use of fertilizer or crop rotation or contour plowing. The natives farmed until the land wore out and then moved on to another spot. To remedy this, the government has set up model farms, launched extensive campaigns to teach better farming methods, and has sent agricultural experts into the reserves to teach modern practices of farming and stock breeding. Such learning the African needs and wants, as he wants to learn the white man's sciences of medicine and industrial technology. But the white settler needs the African too. For Kenya's transition from a pastoral to a cash economy has created a tremendous demand for African workers, of whom the Kikuyus are the best and most numerous. Throughout the White Highlands bordering the Kikuyu reserves, huge farms, each covering thousands of acres, grow sisal, the most important crop in Kenya's booming export trade. Used in the making of rope and paper, the growing and processing of sisal requires the extensive use of hand labor. Sisal leaves grow at the base of tall, flowering plants and must first be cut by hand. A machine removes the outer shell of the leaf and shreds the fiber. But native labor is needed to wash the fiber, to handle the tedious work of drying it, and to load and pack it. Again with coffee, accounting for millions of dollars of Kenya's income, native labor is essential. And in a country lacking coal and oil for large-scale industrialization, these crops, plus secondary industries, must be expanded to raise the African standard of living to a level equal to the whites. Recently, efforts have been made by a small but influential group of moderates to meet the problem. Last year, out of an annual budget of $60 million, over 10 millions were set aside for a land development program in the native reserves. Another 3 millions were spent training 1,500 African teachers and building schools for the education of natives. Construction is underway on the new $500,000 technical college for students of all races from funds supplied by the Kenya government. Over $5 million a year are being spent on much-needed hospitals and medical services for natives. For social and economic progress can mean little to a people sapped by the diseases common to tribal Africans. But the native remembers that it was only 20 years ago that the British home government, over the objections of the white settlers, prohibited compulsory labor on white farms. Thus he insists that any workable solutions must include his right to reject a white man's social philosophy that regards him as a primitive savage. Thus the crisis facing the 30,000 white settlers in Kenya is but a part of the whole problem facing the white man in Africa. Will he insist on holding fast to the doctrine of white superiority and perhaps try, if he can, to relegate the natives to a pastoral economy in the reserves, as was done with the American Indian? Or will he continue to develop new, fresh approaches to political and social needs and try to cope with the awful problems of backwardness? Will he test new ways for black and white to work together in peace and in the fruitful use of Africa's wealth of resources? Today, a pall of fear, mistrust, and anger lies across the African continent like a mist at sundown. In Kenya, when the white settler sits down to dinner, he maintains his accustomed formalities, but with certain unusual trimmings. When a servant enters the room, a gun covers his every move. But the white settler knows there are guns pointing at him too. Invisible guns of a kind far more dangerous and explosive than his. Both sides hope that in time, the guns can be put aside. But it will have to be soon. Time is running out.